Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar for ASAP. We're going to have a webinar here on how a California ECC saved 33 plus minutes a month with ASAP service. Our presenters will be Karen Carlson and Ron Dunn. Just a few housekeeping tips for you. You will all be muted during this webinar. If you have any questions or comments, you can please use the Q&A or the chat sections, which we will be monitoring. Those to be at the right of your screen. We'll do our best to respond to all these questions and comments during the session. If not, the session is being recorded and it will be sent out via a on-demand video with the presentation after the discussion as well, which will be going out next week. So let me turn it over to today's presenters. Ron, would you please introduce yourself? And then Karen, you'll go after him.
Absolutely. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Ron Dunn. I'm currently with Mission Critical Partners. I spent 31 and a half years in public safety communications, retired in June of 2024 with the Riverside Police Department.
Hi, everybody. Karen Carlson. I am the VP and General Manager of the Automated Secure Alarm Protocol. I've got a few more years in public safety than Ron, but not much. Also, happy to be here today and have this conversation with y'all. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, welcome everyone. So really happy to be here to tell you more about this, and just a little tweak on numbers, but it's 33 plus hours per month that we're going to kind of talk about and get to that number. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of a traditional slide-heavy death by PowerPoint presentation, we're going to just have a conversation. Ron and I are going to, talk back and forth about what we both know about ASAP and hopefully share a few new insights with you all. So again, as Ron said, he was the Riverside ECC director when Riverside made the decision to implement ASAP back in 2022. Ron, it's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Karen. I'm glad to be here. This is a thing that's passionate and near and dear to my heart. So
awesome. So Ron, Riverside, no small operation, right? In 2024 alone, they handled more than 756,000 calls for service. So back when you made the decision to move forward with ASAP in 2022, that was a big deal.
It really was. Now, let me give you a little background. I've known about ASAP to PSAP as it was called back then. When it first came out, when APCO worked with TMA back in 2009 to create this, being on the APCO board and being involved in APCO for 20 plus years, I saw this as a tool to where this could actually help dispatch centers save time, save lives, but also resources and stuff like that. Many agencies in California, we tried to get on it for several years, but we kept getting shot down by the California DOJ because it had to go through the CLETS system.
Yeah, the CLETS system. Tell me more about that.
So CLETS is our California law enforcement telecommunication.
Yes.
Telecommunications system. So, nationwide we have NLETs where everything is routed through NLETs to go nationwide. Well, CLETS is our California switch itself. So.
Got it. So, I know a little bit about California, not always the easiest regulatory or operational environment to, try something new. Why did you decide to take this on? Why was ASAP worth it?
Well, like most centers out here, everyone's short staffed. We're all doing more with less. My dispatchers in Riverside were working a ton of overtime, most of it mandatory, just to meet minimum staffing levels. So as a director, you have to look at and say, what can I do to help resolve some of these issues? How can I help with call volume or even workload and stuff like that? So with ASAP, we would get about 1,000 alarms each month. So everything takes about 2 to 3 minutes maximum. So, and everyone knows, let me clarify this. Everyone knows when you get an alarm company, when you get that alarm, it's not just one call from an alarm company. It's multiple calls back and forth because you got to get a key holder. They're giving you the information as far as your RP, who's responding and stuff like that. So it's not just really one call. Plus, right. In our agency in Riverside, we do fire and police. So our dispatchers sometimes would get tied up on emergency medical dispatch calls, which could take anywhere from 2, 3, 5 minutes, depending on the severity of the call, which now put the burden back on the other call takers to have to answer all the, not just the emergency lines, but all the administrative lines where alarms were coming in too. So looking at a whole, it's like, what can we do to best serve our community, but also help our dispatchers?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Ron. I mean, back when I was managing an ECC and then technology for the ECCs, right? I mean, staffing has been an issue for decades.
Mhm.
Not, it's very evident now, but definitely been there. Those alarm notifications and, getting all of those additional voice calls. I mean, I think sometimes up to 5, right? I mean, back and forth like you just described. Was that the primary reason you pushed for a better way to do this?
That was the primary reason. I knew there, like I said, knowing about ASAP and seeing it from its inception to what it's come to now, it was something that I was always interested in. Like I said, unfortunately, California wouldn't let us do it. So I did more research. I liked looking at it, and talking to some people who actually helped kind of create it many, many years ago that were on the APCO side, and looking at it, I thought, this sounds like a good way to, one, get information quicker, but also, like I said, for me, it was relieving the stress off my dispatchers, having to go from call to call to call, not even being able to take a breath sometimes.
Yeah, so when so you made that decision, and now it's time to move on to, implementation. Be honest with this group. How hard was implementation really?
Oh, it was a nightmare to s I'll explain. So, I got to Riverside in 2022, January 2022. Luckily for me, Steve Powell, who was our technical communications person for the dispatch center, he tried to get ASAP back in 2020. He took it up the chain of command. He got approval from them. Um, he found a grant to help fund it and everything else like that. So it was, we had already had a start on it. So for me, like I said, California DOJ would constantly turn us down. Well, luckily for us, we had a chief from Lakeview PD, I believe it was, here in Northern California, called me one day and he sits on the CLETS advisory board. And he said, Ron, I understand that you guys tried to get ASAP, but you got shot down. Can you explain that to me? So I told him the whole story, how we got the funding. We got to the point where we were dealing with the vendor at the time. And as soon as DOJ got involved, they shut us down immediately. So he asked me, he said, if I can convince them, I think it was probably force the board to allow us to do it, will we beta test it for California? And heck yes, we would absolutely do that. I think it was one of the best things that we could do. Let's see. So for us, we started the process. That was probably March, April of 2022 when I talked to the chief. We started the process. It took a month or two before we got approval from DOJ to go ahead and try that. We didn't go out live until almost mid 2023. So we're talking close to a year from the time we started it, because we had to deal with our city IT, the CAD vendor, the ASAP vendor. Getting all of them to agree on anything is hard enough. But then when you bring in California DOJ also and all of their requirements, all of their technical stuff that they had, our city IT we thought was going to be our hardest link, because they're looking at everything, worrying about make sure we have security. Nothing's going to access the systems and stuff like that. But then when the DOJ got involved, I think it became even twice as hard.
Got it. So it sounds like a good year in the making to get everything implemented. If you had to do it again, what would you do differently?
Ooh.
Or if you had a magic wand and you could do something differently, what would that be?
Well, I think one of the things that we would need to do is, I think, getting all stakeholders involved at the beginning, right from the start. Because, like I said, when we started this, it was kind of a piecemeal. Okay, we talked to the chief. He was helping us get it done. We took it up our chain of command. We got the approval. We found the grant funding and stuff like that. But we didn't necessarily involve IT or the DOJ or whoever it was, all the stakeholders from the beginning. Another one of the issues was, okay, now ours is going to be in our CAD system. So now the CAD vendor has to get in, and now we have to jump through all their hoops and all their requirements too. And I think
Sure.
we slow rolled it initially. We didn't understand the magnitude that it was going to be. So I think if we did it differently, I think getting the stakeholders, all of them involved immediately, figuring out what it's really going to look like, might have made it go a little bit smoother.
Sure. And maybe avoiding the state switch.
Avoiding the state switch, definitely.
Very good. All right. So one thing that I hear from ECC leaders is, all this sounds really great, but how do I get that leadership support? You just talked about getting more stakeholders
Mhm.
involved. How did you get leadership support? How did you justify it financially? And was it difficult?
Luckily for me, like I said, I give Steve Powell a lot of credit for at least getting the funding, and what he did is he did a study. He said, okay, he took the average, saying, okay, let's say we take 1,000 calls, they last about 2 minutes each. He actually worked it down to a return on investment to the department and to the city itself. That's how he sold it up the chain. He said, look, if we can get this and we can implement this and it does what they say it does, or it does what we believe it's going to do, that return on investment, I know we're going to talk about it. You mentioned it, 33 hours a month on average that is saved, 33 hours that we give back to the city or to the dispatchers to answer 911s more efficiently, take a breath, all of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things on that. But I think it was just basically the return on investment that really sold the city. You know, we always
Got
worry
it.
about, as management and directors, you're always looking about, you only have a certain amount of budget. And every time we would
Yeah.
go to present something, they say, well, how are you going to pay for this? Well, if you can show them a return on investment, that's money that they're actually saving. And I use that in quotes because people are still working, but they're really saving that money for other things.
Yeah, and I think employee wellness is another big area, right? Where you save, right? It costs the city, counties, everyone who's hiring them, when there's health issues because of the stress and things like that, that comes with a cost. And that's where I think what you're telling us is some of those immediate benefits. So leading into
And
that,
well, just real
what
quick, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but and
that's
that's
okay.
another thing. When you're looking at all this, think about it. Every time you pick up the phone, you're typing calls and everything else like that. Now you have potential more carpal tunnel, more stresses that the dispatchers are dealing with. So you're right. We kind of put the health to the dispatchers and to the center itself, as kind of the forefront.
Awesome. So right off the bat, what did you see for benefits once you were live? What immediately changed in the center?
Oh, the reduced call volume. Like I said, we averaged about 1,000 calls a month, but that 1,000 calls, that's incoming. That doesn't include the back and forth on top of that. So that 1,000 calls turns into, several thousand. You're having to pick up the phone to talk to the alarm companies back and forth like that. So we saw reduced phone traffic, um, cleaner CAD entries. We all know if you've taken an alarm call, the alarm company calls in and gives you 1, 2, 3, 4 street, place, way, whatever. I've done it in the past as a dispatcher too. You transpose and put street or circle or court when it should have been something different. And you don't find out until units go on scene and they go, oh, gee, this is not the right address. And then you have to backtrack and find other things. Like I said, less back and forth with the monitoring centers. Um, One of the best things for us also is it freed up dispatchers or call takers to handle 911s, to be more efficient with the 911s. In the state of California, and I don't know about the other states that are involved here, we have mandated state answering times for our 911s. A lot of agencies don't meet that because of the call volume we have, because of the lack of staffing levels that we have and stuff like that. So it freed them up from having to do those administrative calls that we were doing to
Sure.
focus on the 911s, but also, like I said, be able to take a breath.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe take lunch in the break room instead of at the council, right?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, what I mean, I know this you've been gone for a bit, but how many alarms did Riverside process last year?
Well, the good thing about being gone is with Michelle being there, we're still good friends and stuff like that. So in 2024, Riverside processed 12,231 alarm notifications through ASAP. So think about that. 12,231 calls for the year through ASAP that no one had to pick up. We got the information. Like I said, our call volume, we would average probably 2 minutes per call. So if you times that 12,000 calls times the 2 minutes, you come up with 24,000 and some change. So basically 33 hours per month that was saved of those back and forth telephone calls to free up the dispatchers. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's really compelling. And that's only, I mean, that's using the low end of the average of saving time, right? I mean, I've heard some ECC directors say that many of their alarm calls are averaging up to 5 minutes or 8 minutes even, in some cases. Just depends on that back and forth, and can also be how easy or complex the street name might be, right? How many times do we have to respell Telly Miami Boulevard?
Right. Yeah. And you're right, because I used to be up in the high desert with San Maria County Sheriff's Department. And in Apple Valley, we had a bunch of Indian type names, Iroquois and other stuff like that. How do you spell Iroquois? Well, I learned how to spell it because I had to, but you're right. There's a lot
Right.
of weird spellings that you got to get right.
Correct. Great. Okay, Ron, what's on your mind?
Well, like I said, I've been out of it for a while, and I know things never stay the same. What has changed for ASAP? How is it different, you know, to help alleviate some of the pain points that I had to go through?
Yeah, well, this is where it gets exciting for me because we have made a lot of major changes with ASAP over the last year. Really, the big focus for the last year plus has been on refreshing the technology, refreshing the infrastructure, and we've rebuilt the ASAP broker, and we've put it now inside of the AWS Gov Cloud. So GovCloud, what does that mean? CJIS security, all of the things that you looked for. You know, when Endless was the network of choice in order for us to get all of that security that we really needed in this space. So we've, like I said, refreshed that infrastructure. And by doing that and by putting it up in the GovCloud, really what it's allowed us to do is really strengthen our CAD integrations, and strengthen those CAD integrations because they don't need to go through the state switch anymore. They can if they want to. We definitely can still support that, but it's not required any longer. What does that mean? It means those CAD integrations are now a direct connection. No more custom interfaces state by state, because each CAD vendor had to have, if we were to deploy ASAP across all 50 states, they'd have 50 interfaces basically to maintain in the past, but that's gone. Now it's a direct connection directly from your CAD vendor to the ASAP broker that sits up inside of the AWS GovCloud. What does that also mean? So for those fire only, EMS only ECCs that are out in the US, those secondary dispatch centers, we can now send alarms directly to them and not have to rely on the daisy chain to the primary ECC and then send that down to the secondary. So really, I mean, just a dramatic change in how we're doing things once we've got it up into the AWS GovCloud. That, again, like I'm just going back to the CAD integration. So I work with all CAD vendors. We have relationships with a lot of the bigger CAD vendors and most of the ones that you're probably all familiar with. And we've had some that are right there alongside of us. Motorola was right alongside of us with developing, being a development partner and really bringing it forward. I work really closely with Hexagon and Tyler and Central Square to build this one and done API, right? No more custom interface. So that really makes a big difference when we're talking about cost and speed to implement, right? So we now, because it's a one and done, once your CAD vendor has that interface built, you know, it's really just a matter of implementing that interface and not having a development time in the overall timeline of implementing ASAP. What do you think? You know, just a little bit of that, right, Ron? What would that have meant to changing scope for you?
Oh my gosh, that would have the time and effort and stress, and I'm glad you mentioned that. One thing I mentioned that we did police and fire. One of the bad things about going through the CLET switch is California DOJ said, "You can take law enforcement calls only. You cannot take any fire," which
Right.
was really kind of foolish because a majority of our calls are definitely law enforcement, but so I would get an alarm company who could sit at their console, enter an alarm for us for a police, but then had to pick up the phone to call my center, the exact same person monitoring, because we weren't allowed to enter fire calls because California
Mhm.
DOJ said no. So this would have saved us. Like I said, we didn't get a lot of the fire calls and stuff like that, but this still would have saved it even more. I can see less stress for agencies. Matter of fact, I believe I saw some of my friends that are on here that when I first went into ASAP, they were asking me about what about fire? And I had to tell them, sorry, we can't do it. DOJ won't allow it. But now this way, it allows it. So those agencies, like you said, if they're just fire or if they're combinations, they don't have to bifurcate and say, okay, you can take
Right.
the police alarms, but not those. Man, that's a big improvement.
Awesome. Good to hear. Glad we were making moves in the right direction there. The other thing, and you might be a little bit familiar with this, but the Monitoring Association, who owns ASAP, leverages the ANSI AVS01 scoring structure basically to prioritize
Mhm.
or provide, shouldn't say prioritize, but provide severity levels to the ECC once it's sent through to them. What would that have looked like for you and your team?
This was coming out not long before I did retire, so I kind of saw it, but I didn't really understand it. But the more I do understand it, um, I'll give you a good example. So
Yeah.
if we're in a small PSAP and you're tied up, there's some PSAPs that only have sometimes 2 or 3 working at a given time, and if you have ASAP and the call can get put into your screen with the AVS scores, I can tell you in my agency, if you got a prowler call, you stayed on the phone with it until the officers got on scene. Well, now you're tying up a dispatcher. Now that takes away from somebody else. You could have a panic alarm or a righteous fire, a medical alarm that's coming in, and you don't know about it because you're not answering the phone. Now, if you have
Right.
the ASAP and with the AVS scores, it's great because it pops into there, and you can see if it's an AVS score, the 3 or 4, do I pull units? Do I send it that way? Can I start fire? Do I stage fire? Your watch commander can see, what's going on. If you get a level 4, a confirmed threat's alive, that watch commander is going to be aware of it. He or she can say, hey, let's pull units and let's go handle that. I think, especially with the ASAP, this is a great additional tool for it.
Yeah, it really is, and it's going to expand even more this year and next year as well. So they are introducing advanced threat notification severity level this year, and then also planning to do similar kind of scoring for fire alarms as well moving forward. And it's just it's an extra data point, right? We're not telling anyone how they need to dispatch their alarms. We're giving them more information so they can make those decisions, like you just mentioned, right? They can escalate it, change the number of responders, pull people off of other incidents, things like that, if they choose to do so. The other great thing is today, it all goes into, you get a lot of information directly into the comments, including rich data. Um, you have the ability to get building pre-plans, evacuation plans, videos, audio files, things like that. But for the AVS01 score, moving forward, we're working with the CAD vendors for them to take that score and actually put it into a field. So depending upon your CAD, that goes into a specific field that can trigger a different incident type code, different response codes, things like that. So how would that be?
I think we've seen mass improvements on how things have been handled over the years. So.
Yeah, awesome.
In the 911 field, we always say, "Oh, technology. Technology is great, but it hurts us because we have to learn all the new stuff." Well, ASAP is something we don't really have to learn. Instead of
Yeah.
picking up the phone and doing it all yourself, it gives you the information, and I really love it. So
Yeah, it's just behind the scenes. It's almost like another employee, right? It's like another employee who's like making the data flow from one place to the next without human intervention. Great. Hey, Ron. So, today we talked a bit already in this webinar about staffing challenges.
Mhm.
I know they were really significant back in 2022, a bigger issue even today. Gosh, I mean, when I was managing the center back in 2001, I had staffing challenges, right? So centers are short staffed. That just is the way it is today. If you were still directing an ECC today, facing today's staffing shortages, how critical would that 33 hours a month be to you?
Oh, it'd be majorly critical. Like I said, just freeing up dispatchers sometimes just to take the breath because it's a high stress job. You know, people get their burnout, they get injured, the carpal tunnels and other things at work. Every little bit we can take away from them having to manually do that and not have to think about it, I think is awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Great. And I would say, 33 hours is just the number that, Ron's center Riverside
Mhm.
has stated that they are saving. We've heard figures that are, a little bit lower than that, but we've also heard those that are almost 50 hours a month, right? It just really, really makes a big difference. And who doesn't want to just allow their staff to take a breath in between? So I'm going to shift a little bit to, asking the audience. I know we've got a question in the chat. Ron, I'm going to give this one to you, but did you
Yeah.
get any pushback from your union when you implemented ASAP?
We didn't, only because one of the union representatives was also a dispatcher for us. So we brought her in from the beginning, talking about ASAP, what it was meant to do. And I agree. I've heard others say, well, unions give the pushback. Well, you're just trying to take away people or, those type of things. No, that's not it at all. We're already short staffed. We didn't get rid of any dispatchers. It just we were able to reallocate how they used their time differently. So I would say, like, when we're talking about stakeholders, we were talking about that, getting them involved. Union's probably one of the best ones to get involved too, because like I said, I've heard of quite a few of those where they want to put a kibosh on this because they don't truly understand it. Getting them involved from the get go, letting them see the demonstration, letting them talk to the dispatchers themselves, or even the ASAP people, the subject matter experts and stuff like that, to find out what it's truly like, I think is a great way. So no, we didn't. Luckily, we didn't get any pushback.
Yeah, and Garen, that question came from you, and I have heard about some union pushback in a few spaces, and I think it does come down to the things that Ron just talked about. If you're already short staffed, and maybe even if you have a staffing study that shows that you're understaffed, right? This is about you being able to keep up with the demand, right? And enabling your employees to keep up with the demand and reduce the overwhelm. When you look at the stats on the bottom of this slide, 77% of ECCs are below staffing levels today, right? Of those understaffing averages about 32%. 25 to 44% of ECC staff are experiencing PTSD. Those are just some national stats that are out there. And I think those are things that we can work with you to help you address that with your union. And there's some other live ECC directors who would love to help, pull that together for you. Let's see here, Garen. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, love to work with you more on that, Garen. And would love to hear more about your new CAD that's happening this year.
Yeah, Garen, we'll be in touch.
Very good. All right. Okay, so we are going to play. We've got some extra time here. We do want to keep taking questions, but want to take a little time to ask Ron. You've given such great perspective today, and really like sharing with everyone here what this has meant operationally inside of a very high volume center like Riverside. this is really a big deal even for smaller centers too, right? Because it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you're still getting an alarm and it still takes that amount of time to process it. Ron, if you were advising an ECC director who's on the fence about implementing ASAP, what would you tell them?
I would say absolutely do it. Don't wait. Make sure you get all your ducks in a row. Get ASAP, get the subject matter experts to be able to be involved when you take it up the chain to really talk about what kind of return on investment are you going to get, the costs, everything like that. I don't care how big, how small you are. Like I said, especially in the small PSAPs, when you have one or two dispatchers working by themselves, it's just another tool to help give them some relief. Yes,
Yeah.
these large call centers, you may think, well, gosh, I have 20 people answering the phones. Yes, but those 20 people could be doing so many other things to make the center work a whole lot better, tracking down other things, doing whatever they can. So I would say don't wait. You absolutely should do it.
Yeah, sounds good. And I obviously agree. My old center is an ASAP user today, and I'm very happy to see that. Any other questions that anyone